After I spoke up about harassment, my hours got cut in half. They said it was budget, but the guy I reported got a new title and a team. So I secretly met with a journalist. Monday morning, our company was on the front page. My name wasn't there, but my coworkers knew. The silence in the office was louder than any apology. I started working at the company in 2020. It was the middle of the pandemic, and I was just grateful to have a job. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent, and I liked the team I was on. I handled client accounts, mostly project coordination and marketing campaign timelines. Nothing flashy, just reliable, detail-focused work. I stayed late, always delivered, and kept a low profile. I wasn't the kind of person who caused trouble. The company liked to brand itself as progressive. There were DI meetings, mental health newsletters, and leadership that talked about transparency. At first, I bought into it. It felt like a place where people cared about doing things right. That changed in early 2024 when a new project manager came on board. His name was Eric. He was in his late 30s, came from some startup that had folded, and talked constantly about his grind set. From the beginning, he was overly familiar with me in a way that made my stomach turn. He'd stand behind me while I worked, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. He made little comments that were just off enough to stay out of HR territory until they weren't. The messages started about 2 weeks after he joined. Late night slacks with things like, thinking about how you handled that meeting today, you're dangerous, lol. At first, I tried to ignore them, even sent a few polite one-word replies to not seem difficult. But they kept coming. More suggestive. He started texting me somehow, asking if I had plans, saying I owed him a drink for picking up a slack on a report. I never gave him my number. I never once encouraged him. I started saving everything. Screenshots, Slack logs, timestamps. I don't know when exactly I realized I needed to protect myself, but it was probably the night he sent me a photo of a drink with the caption, "Wish you were here. You'd look good across this table." I didn't respond. A week later, I sat across from HR. I remember sweating through my shirt while I explained what was going on. I showed them screenshots, walked them through the behavior. I didn't cry. I stayed calm. I said I wasn't trying to make a big deal. I just wanted it documented. I asked them to handle it quietly. They nodded, scribbled notes, told me they were glad I came forward, that they took these things very seriously. I left that room feeling shaky, but weirdly proud. Like maybe. Finally, I stood up for myself. That feeling didn't last. Over the next few weeks, things started shifting. Small things at first. I was pulled from a long-term client project with no warning. My hours were reduced for budgeting reasons. I was told it was across the board, but no one else's schedule changed. Just mine. They said it was temporary. They said it wasn't personal. But my workload was being handed off to junior staff. Meetings I used to lead happened without me. I wasn't CC'd on planning threads. My name vanished from client decks. Then came the team announcement. Excited to announce Eric's promotion to senior project lead. I stared at that email for 5 minutes before I could breathe. He was smiling in the attached photo, standing next to a sheet cake, with "Congrats, Eric," written in thick blue icing. 2 new hires had been added to his team, both of whom I had trained when they were interns. No mention of the complaint. No mention of me. It was like none of it happened. Worse, people stopped talking to me. Lunch invites disappeared. Coworkers who used a swing by my desk now avoided eye contact. I'd walk into the break room and conversations would stop. I wasn't even the harassment girl. I was just untouchable. I tried to bring it up again. I emailed HR, got no reply. I called, got voicemail. I waited outside their office once and got told they were in back-to-back meetings all day. I went home that night and cried until my eyes swelled shut. After that, I stopped waiting for someone to fix it for me. I started tracking everything. Every missed meeting I was excluded from. Every assignment I was mysteriously cut out of. I went back through old messages, looked up internal documentation. I even found a slide deck from a town hall where they promised no retaliation for speaking up. I kept it. Then I found the journalist. Her name had shown up in an article I read months earlier about another company mishandling internal misconduct. I sent her an encrypted email. I didn't give my name, just said I had information about a company in my industry covering up workplace harassment. She responded the next day. We met at a coffee shop 2 neighborhoods away. I brought printouts, copies of internal emails, screenshots of messages, and a timeline of events. She was calm, professional, and didn't push me to go on record. I told her I didn't want to be the face of it. I just wanted the truth out there. She spent the next few weeks verifying everything. She reached out to others, quietly. Some of them spoke anonymously. Some didn't respond at all. But she had enough. She told me the story was going live on a Monday. I didn't sleep Sunday night. When I woke up, my phone already had a dozen messages. Coworkers. One from my old manager that just said, "Have you seen this?" The article didn't name me, but it named the company. It laid out the timeline, the HR failure, the retaliation, the promotion, the culture of silence. I rode the train to work with the article open on my phone, reading it again and again. My hands were shaking. I felt sick, but I also felt steady, like maybe I hadn't imagined it all. When I got to the office, you could feel it. People weren't talking. Or, if they were, it was in hushed tones. Eric's desk was empty. HR's office was dark. An all-hands meeting got scheduled and then abruptly canceled. I sat down at my desk and started answering emails like nothing happened. People walked by and glanced at me, but no one said anything. Not even the ones who used to ask if I wanted to grab coffee. That silence? It was louder than anything anyone could have said. The rest of that week was a blur. By Tuesday, an emergency HR investigation had been initiated. At least that's what the email said. There was a company-wide message sent out late that night talking about recent allegations and how leadership was committed to a full and transparent review. It was damage control. You could smell the panic. By Wednesday, Eric still hadn't returned to the office. His name disappeared from the internal org chart. His Slack status was away, and his calendar showed as private. No one said if he was fired. No one said if he quit. And still no one asked me a thing. HR never contacted me. Not even to pretend they were investigating. Instead, I started noticing strange little things. My computer was slow in the mornings, like someone was remotely checking it. I stopped getting calendar invites from my new supervisor. A friend in IT quietly messaged me and told me they'd been asked to pull email logs on someone from marketing. They weren't told who, but the timeline matched mine exactly. It wasn't an investigation. It was a witch hunt. On Thursday, I was called into a meeting with HR, not to talk about my report, not to support the journalist's article, but to review concerns about my behavior. They said I'd been distracted, less engaged, and possibly leaking sensitive materials. They said someone reported me. I asked who. They wouldn't say. I sat in that room while they fed me polite accusations, and I didn't respond. I just watched their faces. 2 of them. One kept checking her phone. The other couldn't even look me in the eye. They were trying to find a reason to fire me. That night, I went home and backed everything up again. New USB. New cloud folder. Sent a second encrypted email to the journalist. Told her what was happening. Told her they were retaliating again, this time more aggressively. She didn't reply right away. I assumed she was busy. Or maybe she'd already moved on. Friday morning, I showed up at work and my badge didn't work. It buzzed red 3 times before the security guard came over and asked me to step aside. I stood in the lobby with people walking past me, pretending not to stare. I didn't say a word. The guard just kept saying, "Sorry, I was told to ask you to wait." After 20 minutes, someone from HR finally came down. They took me into a side room and told me I was being put on administrative leave. No pay, no explanation beyond pending internal review. When I asked for something in writing, they said legal would follow up. I wasn't escorted out, but the message was clear: leave and don't come back. I sat in my car for a long time after that. I felt like I was shaking, but my hands weren't moving. I kept thinking about all the things I didn't do wrong, all the things I did right, and how none of it mattered. They didn't just want to silence me, they wanted to erase me. When I got home, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a printout of the article that had gone viral and a sticky note on top of it that said, "Nice move, be careful." No signature, no handwriting I recognized. My chest went cold. For a second, I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? I took a picture, emailed it to the journalist. This time, she replied within minutes. She told me I wasn't the only one they were retaliating against. Two others, both women, had reached out after the article. One had left the company last year after a similar complaint. The other was still working there, barely hanging on. Neither wanted to go public yet, but they were watching, just like me. That weekend, I got an anonymous text. Just one sentence. They're digging into your personal accounts. I changed every password I had. By Monday, my inbox had been deactivated. My LinkedIn started getting weird connection requests from profiles with no photos and made-up job titles. The journalist reached out again and said the company had quietly hired a crisis PR firm. They were trying to find out who the source was. They were trying to get ahead of another story, but they were too late because I wasn't just a source anymore. The second article dropped 2 weeks later. It was even more detailed than the first. This time, the journalist had gotten a former senior-level employee to go on record, someone from HR who had left just a few months before all this happened. She said, in her own words, that the company had a pattern of quietly burying complaints and rewarding those who stayed silent. She mentioned internal directives that discouraged documenting certain types of issues. She even described an internal meeting where Eric's behavior had been brought up months before I ever said anything. She said they knew. They always knew. The article didn't name me, but it named names, including Eric's and the VP of HR. It also referenced a source who had been put on unpaid leave after the first article, despite providing verifiable proof. This time, my phone exploded. Former coworkers, industry contacts, even a client I hadn't heard from in months reached out saying, "I think I just read about you." People were connecting the dots. I hadn't said a word publicly, but they all knew it was me. That Monday, the company went into full lockdown mode. They disabled all social media comments, scrubbed internal forums, and scheduled a mandatory town hall. Then, the real twist came. The board launched an external investigation. Not HR, not legal, the actual board. Apparently, someone higher up had gotten cold feet. Maybe it was the pressure from the press, or the number of employees threatening to quit, or the investors starting to sniff out the rot. But suddenly, there were lawyers who didn't work for the company asking real questions. Third-party consultants interviewing staff. An anonymous survey circulated. I wasn't allowed back in the building, but my name came up again and again. And then another twist. Eric filed a defamation lawsuit. Not against the company, against unknown individuals for slandering his reputation and damaging his career. The clear subtext, he was trying to scare me into silence without saying my name. It backfired, because when he filed that lawsuit, he opened himself up to discovery. The journalist reported it in the third article, this one with court documents attached. Screenshots, internal messages, even some texts from Eric's personal phone that had been part of another complaint years earlier from a different company. A pattern was emerging. That's when the public turned. Until then, people were watching it like any corporate scandal. Maybe some thought I was exaggerating. Maybe they assumed it was messy on both sides. But now, the story had receipts. HR heads rolled. Eric dropped the lawsuit before it went to hearing. The VP of HR resigned 2 days later. But I wasn't celebrating, because the company still hadn't contacted me. Not once. No apology. No reinstatement. Just silence. And then something happened I didn't expect. A package showed up at my apartment. It was from one of the interns I'd trained, the one who'd ended up on Eric's new team. Inside was a letter, 3 pages long, handwritten. She said she was sorry. She said she'd heard what was happening but didn't know how to help. She said Eric made her uncomfortable, too, but she was afraid to say anything. She said she heard people talking about me behind closed doors, leaders calling me a liability, a problem, a risk, and she said something that stuck with me. They weren't scared because you lied. They were scared because you were telling the truth. I read that letter over and over. It was the first time anyone had said they believed me without conditions. A few days later, I got a formal offer from the company, a small payout, a non-disclosure agreement, and a signed document saying I'd never work there again. I laughed out loud. That's when I knew I wasn't done. I didn't sign their NDA. I sent it back with a note. I'm not for sale. I was angry, but it wasn't just anger anymore. It was something deeper, like my body finally stopped asking for approval. I didn't want my old job back. I didn't want their cake-in apology email. I wanted the truth to live somewhere they couldn't control. And it did, because the journalist kept digging. Turns out, the company had tried this before. She uncovered a total of 4 past employees, 3 women and 1 man, who had left under suspicious circumstances after making complaints. None had spoken up publicly. Most were afraid to. But now they had a paper trail. She worked with them for months, building a bigger investigation. And when the 4th article dropped, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a pattern. Major media picked it up. Not just blogs or Twitter threads, actual news outlets. One of the company's biggest clients dropped them. Their stock took a hit. Their director of culture and inclusion posted a tone-deaf response on LinkedIn that got ratioed so hard she deleted her account. Internally, I found out through contacts that over a dozen employees submitted formal complaints within 2 weeks of that article. People who had stayed quiet before realized they weren't alone. HR couldn't contain it anymore. They started offering quiet severance packages left and right. One manager told a mutual contact that the company feels radioactive. And me? I was done being quiet. The journalist finally convinced me to speak on record for the 5th piece. I didn't use my full name, just first name and role, but I told everything, start to finish. No dramatics, just facts. Every time they retaliated, every meeting where they smiled to my face and cut me behind my back, every part of it. The piece was called Retaliation Culture at the Top, a company that rewards silence. My quote was simple. They said they were listening. They weren't. They were waiting for me to go away. I didn't go away. A few weeks later, I was contacted by a nonprofit that works with workplace harassment victims. They'd read my story and asked if I'd consult on a panel they were organizing about retaliation. I said yes. I ended up doing 4 events with them over the next year. At one of those events, someone from my old company showed up. Not in a confrontational way. Quietly. They didn't speak. But I saw them. They saw me. And after the session, they left without saying anything. I think that was their apology. Or maybe their confession. Eric? He faded. Quietly scrubbed his LinkedIn. Tried to rebrand himself. But it never worked. Every time he tried to join a new company, someone would find the article. Screenshots never die. And tech is small. He went from speaking at industry events to barely getting interviews. The last I heard, he was doing contract work under a fake business name, hiding behind an LLC. The VP of HR filed a wrongful termination suit against the company. It got dismissed. The company still exists, but it's smaller, quieter, hollowed out. Half of leadership is gone. They hired a new ethics officer and love posting videos about rebuilding trust, but everyone knows the stink doesn't go away. And me? I got hired by a competitor, one who reached out after the 3rd article. They told me, "We've been following this. We're sorry you went through it. I work fewer hours now, make more money, and I sleep through the night. I still keep the screenshots. I still have the letter the intern sent me. Sometimes I take it out, read it, and remember that version of myself, scared, quiet, erasing herself to be acceptable. She deserved better. So I gave her justice. Not the kind with fireworks. The kind that ruins silence. Forever.